everybody can learn how to do it, but most people won't. Just like everybody can learn how to play a piano,
Okay.
good enough to play in an orchestra perhaps, but most of us won't because it's too much trouble, takes too long, and it's a lot of hard work, and we'd rather drink beer and go party or do something else rather than spend 5 hours a day practicing the piano. So it's a similar thing. Remote viewing can be done, and there's lots of evidence for those people who have learned how to do it. And it's not that they are somehow different than other humans because they've learned how. Anybody could learn how, but it takes time and patience and a lot of work to get good at it.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that it's not something that you do with your intellect. Matter of fact, the intellect has to be gotten rid of. This all has to come from what I call the being level. And a lot of people have a real hard time trying to figure out what that is, what this being level is relative to their intellect. Because we, particularly in Western culture, tend to work out of our heads. Our intellect is like the main thing. That's how we run our life. Well, that intellect will not succeed at remote viewing because that's not how it works. You have to get at a level of consciousness that's outside the intellect. And that takes a little practice how to get there. I guess the first step in that practice is to learn how to meditate and get into a really good meditation state and hold that stable in a theta state. Be the theta being a brainwave. It's a thing you measure with an EEG.
Right.
Electrodes on your head, and there's alpha, theta, delta. There's lots of things there. The different frequencies have names. So the theta state is the state just before you generally fall asleep. It's in that very low frequency at around 4 hertz or so. You get down to 2 hertz, that's delta, and that is unconscious. That's when you're unconscious. Those are skills that you have to learn how to do this.
Okay.
So it's not just that everybody walking around is going to do it. Now, can these practitioners do that? Yes, they can. But because it's not only that it has to be from the being level, but this being level has to be more caring, more love-based, more positive than negative, than ego, than I'm going to find an advantage. So, for instance, there's a guy who teaches remote viewing, and he will routinely have a class at Las Vegas, and they learn. And he teaches also psychokinetics. I guess this is one I'm talking about. There's one remote viewing and psychokinetics. Well, the one that does psychokinetics, they can make the dice come up, let's say, pairs, get the same number on each die. They can change the probability of these things happening. Now, it doesn't work 100%. They're not controlling the dice with their mind. They just change the probability of what comes up. But they can move that probability a bit in their favor. And they generally will get together, practice, then they'll go out on the tables and they win a lot of money. But before they start, they've already designated a charity to which the money will be given to. So that's how they keep themselves able to do this. There's a moral component to it. To really have power at the being level where these things are affected, you need to have a very positive, other-centered attitude rather than a self-centered attitude. The self-centered attitude takes you right back into the fear, ego, intellect game. You see, it's not.
Okay.
It runs you back to the intellect where nothing works. So in order to keep this process at the being level where it's helpful, it has to be positive rather than negative. It has to be caring, rather than self-centered. So that's part of it. Now, you can be self-centered and still learn to do these things somewhat, but you'll never be really, really good at it. You'll be so-so at it. Yeah, it does work, and people can do that. They can modify how the dice come up, and they can remote view things. I was with a group of people a year or so ago in Las Vegas who were remote viewing the future, and then of sports teams, outcomes of sports events, and then placing their bets based on what they remote viewed. And they had a very clever little method for doing that, and they were mostly very successful. And but they were doing really small bets. They were mostly wanted to see, could they do it? That was the point. Not how much money they could make, but just enough to show that they could do it. So they were experimenting.